You consider yourself a really mindful parent, someone who's really self-aware, and you do your best to emotionally regulate, interact and connect with your children, be present, all of that. And yet there's still these moments, can't stop snapping, yelling, or losing your patience and your temper. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you why mindset alone doesn't work, the different stress patterns that show up to hijack your system, and the way that this relates to the different parenting styles that you may be falling under. And which parenting style works best, and how do you get back to that in those moments of stress when you're defaulting to one of these other ones because of your stress patterns. So let's go. You've done the therapy, you've read the books, you've listened to the podcasts, you've done the mindset work, and you know, and you're trying your best, and yet there's something blocking you. Well, the reason you can't break through, by the way, I've been there, is it's not that you're failing, it's not that you need more discipline, it's not that you need a better mindset. It's because it's in your body. So what most people don't realize is that 80 to 90% of your vagus nerve network, this is your brain, that's your nervous system, it's actually wired to transmit from body to brain. And it's only 10 to 20% wired to transmit from brain to body. And yet so many of us have been taught to dissociate, ignore, and suppress our nervous system, where we're not getting those messages because we're focusing on the brain. And that's why mindset alone and the knowledge of what you want to be doing is not enough to force your body to cooperate. Instead, it's very much about working with your body and your nervous system rather than against it, rather than ignoring, suppressing, dissociating, and working with it to understand what's happening in the moment, giving yourself the support that you need to move through it so you can transition seamlessly back into a place where you feel emotional safety again, so that you can connect with a part of yourself and your brain and your body that allows you to connect, to perform, and to create. So let's talk about what happens in a stress response. But first, before we do that, I'm actually going to talk about the different parenting styles and the way it relates to your stress. So you've got these different quadrants, and these represent the 4 different parenting styles, which is backed by research. And the quadrants are separated by 2 different spectrums. So on the one spectrum, you've got expectations. Expectations are things like structure, routine, boundaries, what your child needs to be doing, that kind of thing. And then on the other end of the spectrum is what I call attunement. This is attunement to your child and what they need. So the way it works is the 2 different spectrums is based on low and then high, low and high. And then that determines what kind of parenting style it falls into. So I've renamed these to make it easier to understand. I've called it expectations and attunement, and then depending on the different parenting style, I've also renamed that. So let's start here. Low, low. I call this the withdrawn retreater. This is where you've got low expectations on part of the child, for the child I mean, from the parent, and you've also got low attunement to the child and what they need. If we move over here, this is low expectation, but also high attunement. So high attunement to the child's needs, low expectations, routine, structure, and I call that the giving appeaser. So over here we've got low attunement, high expectations, and I call that the rigid enforcer. And then the last one is high and high attunement, high expectations, and I call this one the steady connector. So what the research does not talk about is why it is that out of all of these, only one parenting style stands out as the one that is the most effective, whereas the other ones don't really work so well. So I'm going to explain my perspective in terms of why that is. So if you think about it, expectations represents the parent and what they want. Attunement represents the child and what they want and need as well. So if we're looking at the withdrawn retractor, you've got low expectations, so representing the parent, it's small, and then low attunement to the child as well. So the parent's not really getting what they need, child's not really getting what they need either. No one gets what they need. There's like a big gap here, so it's small. Then we've got the giving appeaser, where you've got high attunement to the child, but you've got low expectations on part of the parent. So you can see the parent is small, child is large. So the parent is sacrificing themselves in order to compensate for the child. Then over here, when we look at rigid enforcer, we've got parent that's high expectations, and the child is low, small. So the child is being sacrificed for the parent's expectations. And then finally, when we look at steady connector, we've got high attunement, high expectations. No one's sacrificing anything, and it's a collaborative, co-creating kind of dynamic, clear communication, clear boundaries. Everyone is getting what they need. And this is why this not only models for the child that it's okay to have needs and boundaries and what structure routine looks like, but no one is sacrificing anything to compensate for someone else. And that is why, in my experience, the steady connector is the most effective parenting style. Now, when we're talking about stress, all of us will exhibit some of the different forms, the different styles of parenting. These patterns show up in us. And if you think about it from a stress perspective, there are different states of stress responses that depending on our situation, and I'm not going to get into that science, that's going to be a future video. But when we talk about the stress response, there's the different stress responses that you've probably heard about. So there's fight or flight, we've got freeze, we've got fawn, right? So fight or flight, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Freeze is where your body starts to conserve energy and resources because it doesn't think that you will survive if you fight or flight. So it feels like we need to conserve energy and help you survive by freezing and, hiding. And then we've got fawn, which is a more developed one, which is that you have to appease the people around you in order to be accepted and find a sense of belonging so that you won't be, from a evolution and nervous system perspective, so you won't be killed, so that you can survive. So if we think about it, this giving appeaser relates to the fawn, stress response. The withdrawn retreater relates to the freeze, stress response. And then the rigid enforcer relates to the fight or flight response. So these different responses show up in your parenting depending on what's going on for you in your body. So when you are doing really, really well, you will have the chosen mode that you operate in that defines your general parenting style. But in moments of stress, stress hijacks your parenting style and inserts a different kind of parenting pattern that influences how you interact with your child. And therein lies the insight into those moments where under high stress you might be snapping, you might be reacting to things in ways that you had not chosen for yourself. So where you're more direct, you're more forceful, you're less accommodating, it might be that this rigid enforcer is taking over. In those moments where you feel like you have no energy, you can't engage, and you're completely withdrawn, well then that withdrawn retreater is taking over. And then those moments where you feel like you're worried about conflict, you're worried about the dynamic with your child, and you feel like you can't handle them being upset with you, well then you may be moving into this giving appeaser stress response and pattern. And the way that we repattern it is, number one, by raising awareness and being aware of these patterns when they start to happen. And if you want to learn more about the other steps, I've got a video that goes into more of that detail, and the link is in my bio. I'll see you there.